Welcome everyone. Adam Lafacci, your moderator, joining you and thanking you so much for joining us for today's Smithsonian Online Education Conference session. Today we're going to be talking about urban waterways, but before we jump into it, I'm just going to cover a few technical aspects of the online room with you. Starting with the chat box on the left side of the screen, which you can use to enter your questions and comments throughout the session today. Now, if you have any content-related questions, we'll try to tackle those as we go along, but also know that if you have any technical issues, you can let me know in that box, and I'll respond to you privately to get those sorted out as quickly as we can. Now, if for any reason you have a larger technical issue and you're not able to ask me for assistance, you can also email us at smithsonian@learningtimes.com for assistance. We will also be providing live closed captioning for today's event, and you'll see those appear at the bottom of the screen once we get started with the main content today. We hope that's useful for you, but if it's distracting, you can always click on the drop-down menu and change it to No Captions. We'd like to remind you that the conversation is not just limited to the online room today, but we also want you to keep engaging with us with the Smithsonian Quests and shareable Smithsonian Education badges. And Ashley Naranjo will be joining us from the Smithsonian in a moment to talk about those more in depth. But I'd also like to note that we're also in the Twitterverse, so feel free to tweet with us on Twitter using #UrbanWaterways. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to Ashley Naranjo to talk to us a little bit more about the Smithsonian badges and online quests.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much, Adam. As Adam mentioned, my name's Ashley Naranjo, and I work here at the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access, which is a central education office that collaborates with the Smithsonian's 19 museums and 9 research centers. As you might have noticed when you were logging in, there's a schedule of upcoming programs as well as archived sessions. And we're so glad to have Tony Thomas with us from the Smithsonian's Anacostia Community Museum today, and look forward to next month when we'll be joined for a 4-part series on time and navigation with presenters from both the National Air and Space Museum as well as the National Museum of American History. We're also excited to announce that we've uploaded over 100 hours of archived online conferences onto Smithsonian Education's YouTube channel. Past themes have ranged from Abraham Lincoln to climate change, and as you can see, they all offer an interdisciplinary approach to thematic topics. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, you'll also note that we've created a number of different Smithsonian Quest digital badging opportunities in conjunction with these topics of the sessions. These are digital badging opportunities and activities that students can complete before, after, or even independent of the sessions themselves. Our newest digital badge is the Waterways Watcher, which asks students to complete 3 related activities, the first being to map their watershed. For example, here in DC, we're part of the Potomac, Anacostia, and Occoquan watershed, and the students are asked to think about what friendly advice they might offer to a friend who says maybe saving water is too hard in their busy lives. And we have a great student submission from user P-Starfish99, and she highlights some of her best tips. Finally, students are asked to explore resources from the Smithsonian's Environmental Research Center and learn about some of the challenges that coastal ecosystems face. In all, we have about 10 water-themed badge opportunities, so I hope you and your students will explore them in the future. Tony and his student citizen scientists, also documented their work via an ePal site, which offers information about their journey and resources for learning more about how to create your own project in your own community. We've also collected some resources on our Smithsonian Education Pinterest page, and regularly update our boards with relevant educational resources like learning games, lesson plans, and videos. I hope you enjoy this session, and be sure to look out for additional resources in the chat area. Thanks.
Wonderful, and thank you, Ashley. And we are now going to turn the floor over to our speakers for today. We're going to start off with Tony Thomas from the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. And thank you so much for joining us today, Tony.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Adam. I appreciate the opportunity to present this program and share with the audience the experiences that our students have pursued over the last year.
Wonderful, and thank you. And to kick things off today, we're just going to start off with a brief video highlighting some of the components of the project we'll be discussing today. So we hope that you enjoy this.
Reclaiming the Edge, Urban Waterways and Civic Engagement was a mission-changing exhibition that the Anacostia Community Museum planned for 2012 through 2013. Since 2010, the Anacostia Community Museum has researched issues related to densely populated watersheds through its Urban Waterways initiative. Topics of focus have included the impact of suburbanization on upstream, downstream influences, the cultural attitudes of diverse populations toward local ecosystems, and national rivers and urban development. The Anacostia Watershed anchors one of the nation's most densely populated watersheds, and it's only covering 175 miles square of land use. The Citizen Scientist Project was designed to meet the needs of the Urban Waterways Initiative, and it was designed to promote grassroots level action in addressing the issues uncovered through the museum's ongoing research and documentation activities. The project engaged residents and youth in activities that increase their understanding of urban water quality issues that affect the Anacostia watershed specifically, but any watershed found on the planet. The goal was to create environmental stewards, and we did this by engaging the students in increased knowledge, skills, and content development, and this, we hope, would result in more activists and advocates for the environmental health of their community. The objectives we started out with was to define what a watershed is. We then took a trip and covered the whole watershed from the head to the mouth. And if you don't know what a watershed is, think of a bathtub with many different faucets. All of the water that pours out of those faucets falls into that watershed, into that tub, and it all exits the tub by the drain. So there's only one drain. So the faucets are the heads, and the drain is the mouth of the watershed. And all of the water that falls within the boundary of the top of that bathtub goes into that watershed. The top of the bathtub divides one watershed from another. So we live in the Anacostia watershed, which is part of the Potomac watershed, which is part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which flows into the Atlantic Ocean. So one watershed, no matter how small, flows into another. What this geographical area was like, how the land use was different upstream than downstream. We visited water treatment facilities, both for drinking and wastewater, and learned how this water is treated, and what are the careers associated with this treatment of the water. We explored main tributary from the by boat, by foot, and by bus. And we also engaged in a chemical water quality testing protocol, a monitoring protocol. And this is what you're going to find out about today from the students. And now I'm going to turn it over to the students, Cristal and Z.
Wonderful, and thanks so much for joining us today. So we've got a series of some great photos of the work that you guys have been doing, and we'd love to hear a little bit more about the process. I'd also like to note that we are joined today by Kenny Carroll, who's jumping on with us now too. And maybe can you give us a brief overview of the program specifics that we're going to be looking at?
Sure. Thanks again for this division's POWER program. And POWER stands for Providing Opportunity with Educational Readiness. And it's a 6-year college prep program. So many of the students have been with us for the last 5 years working to prepare for college. This past year, we were challenged by our director to come up with a way to provide a uniqueness to the college prep experience for our students. And in that vein, I sought out Tony Thomas and the Anacostia Community Museum because as a former classroom teacher, I know about some of the wonderful offerings they provide to students. And I was particularly intrigued by the Urban Waterways exhibit that was just opening up. And so we met with Tony Thomas and some of his staff and talked about the possibilities of having our students participate in the Citizen Scientist Project. We have over 40 students in our POWER program, and they move as a cohort. So at the time, they were all in the 10th grade. And we just wanted them to get an opportunity in a number of areas, including STEM skills and career opportunities. And we should add college opportunities to pursue STEM. And then also the civic engagement portion. These young people live within, shouting distance of the Anacostia Museum and its watershed, of the Anacostia and its watershed. And many have no idea. So when Tony and his staff took some of the kids this summer into the creeks and the areas around where they live, they had never been there, didn't know about the Anacostia all the way down into Maryland, didn't know about the streams like the Watts Branch and those other that fed into the Anacostia. And so this was a learning experience and one that engaged them in so many areas of academic enrichment, and most importantly, gave them a consciousness about the environment where they lived. And so, as Tony talked about, this being a kind of a mission-changing experience for the Anacostia Museum, this was certainly, I think, a life-changing experience for the students who participated in the program, and for UPO, because so much fed off of this Citizen Scientist Project with the Anacostia Museum. Kids then participated in an advanced computing project. They also got to use the information they learned the past summer with the Anacostia Museum. They took that information and competed in some national competitions around service learning and presentation. And lastly, I'll say that what the Anacostia Museum provided for our students in the 6-week project also gave them preparation in research and teamwork. So how do we not only learn about our environment, come up with solutions as a team, and then present those solutions to an August body that the Anacostia Museum had hosting our students for their final presentation.
Great, wonderful. And you'll notice we've been clicking through a few of the pictures here, and Z and Cristal, if there are some that I've passed by that you want to share some comments on, let me know, and we can definitely jump back a little earlier. There were some great ones here that I'd love to know a little bit more about what was going on. Maybe can you talk a little bit about some of the specific work you were doing here?
Well, in this picture, we were testing the pH balance of the water, and to test the pH balance, that basically mean that we were testing the water to see if it was drinkable or not, or able to be consumed by humans.
Great.
And also, the pH also depending on the pH, different fish live they live in the same amount as, in neutral pH, just like we drink the water. So if it's not drinkable for us, it's not a survivable pH level for the fish.
That's great. How much of that testing did you have to do? How long did it take to kind of piece together the answers you were looking for?
Well, we had to go to different places along the Anacostia River because different places are affected by different things. And it took us maybe like every Friday we went on a field trip to do these testing. So maybe like the fifth week is when we finally came to the conclusion.
Wow. Okay. So every Friday.
Well, the conclusion that we found was that the Anacostia River is, as we expected, it's not consumable for human consumption, or it's not healthy for the marine life that is inside of it.
Ah, I know that ties really well into one of the questions that just popped up here in chat. Were you able to identify how the waterways were most commonly polluted? Do you know what caused it?
One of the reasons that it was so polluted was because of the excess sediment. Because like some places along the Anacostia River doesn't have walls. Like walls would keep out the excess sediment from whenever there's a storm. And because of the excess sediment, the pollutants it's collected inside the soil. And bottom feeders, like catfish, they eat off the bottom of the floor, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get polluted and they get tumors, so that affects the pH also.
Wow. Why was the sediment so polluted? Were you able to identify what some of the connections there were? Where was it coming from?
Some reasons were well, it was trash. It could be fertilizers. It's a lot of things that contribute to the pollution of the Anacostia River.
And I think we also learned about the overflow of the storm drains and how you get sewage into the system when there's heavy rains or there's heavy overflow. That was important for the students to learn that, the ways.
What are you doing here in this picture? Because it doesn't look like you're on the banks of the river taking water samples. Is this something else?
Well, in this picture, we were actually, well, through the program provided by the Anacostia Community Museum, we learned about different tributaries, and in this photo, we're just mapping out the different tributaries and like learning where they are.
Okay. Excellent. So it looks like then, as you were doing the mapping, you were also taking some samples along the way. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is correct. Like in this picture, we're outside of the treatment plant, and right after when we tested the water right directly after it was treated, that's when it was a difference from the beginning of the Anacostia River to the end because of the treatment plant.
Yeah, and that's, I think, another important aspect of working with the Anacostia Community Museum is that we were able to partner with other organizations here. This is the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and the students are on one of their Explorer boats, and we were able to go up the length of the Anacostia almost to the Potomac, I believe, near the bridge. So we were able to partner with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and the Chesapeake Trust Foundation, which provided funding to help support these projects.
That's great. And just looking through a few of these images here, it looks like there were quite a few things that you were working on. Did you pick up any new skills around here? I'm not quite sure what this test is, but it looks totally new to me.
That's that test was for the turbidity. So we measured the clearness of the water, and that tells us how much excess sediment is there too. Because if there's a lot of sediment there, then it gets that means if there's a lot of excess sediment, then the water is not as clear, and yeah, the sun can't reach the plants, and then they can't grow, then the fish can't eat. It's a process.
Sounds like a pretty bad domino effect right there.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to see how it only took a little. It was only a very short length that we couldn't see anything. It was like maybe less than 10 centimeters.
Wow. And were you able to outline some kind of future actions based on this? What were the conclusions in that regard? Things that you might do personally, or things that you recommended to the
It collects the trash, but it doesn't collect all the trash throughout the whole process. So the toxins that's in the plastics and the trash, it seeps into the water, and that would just be one of the things that people should not do if they want to help the Anacostia River, and of course spread the word.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you have anything to add, Z?
Well, no, Cristal pretty much summed it up. That's what I was thinking, well, that's the major thing we can do is stop polluting and spread the word of, like, stop polluting or littering. Sorry. Yeah, just spread the word of not littering, because that litter, as you said earlier, it creates a domino effect and it ends up harming the marine life.
Interesting. And have you communicated pieces of this information to parts of the community? And if so, how? How has it been received?
We will. We have created like a short way to educate the community. So it's basically like a skit telling everybody about how polluted the Anacostia River is, some of the ways that it affects us, and some of the things that we can do to make it better. And it's not just like, if we can get the word out, then there's going to be more people and more organizations that can help us. And it'll be more things than just a band along that will filter the Anacostia River.
So is this a skit that you all wrote based on the information that you found? And is it one that you performed as well, or is it something that you send around to share with people that has the information so they can use it themselves?
Well, we had the data already collected, because at the end of this project, we had to present what we learned, and we had a specific topic to present on. The topic that my team did was phosphorus and nitrates. Like, we broke up and we had different teams. So I found out that some of the ways that the Anacostia River affects humans is that pregnant women that drink the water, they might have children that's born with the blue baby syndrome. And these babies can be born with being lethargic, vomiting, diarrhea, and they're born with heart defects.
Wow, that's a major finding right there.
Yeah, because it doesn't just pollution doesn't just affect the Anacostia River; it affects humans as well.
I think that was the other important aspect of the project with the Anacostia Community Museum, is that the students were broken into teams, and the teams had to identify both a problem that the watershed faced, and then had to present solutions. And that helped us, the power program, in other ways, because the students got to do some things like research, preparation of papers, working in a team format, and we were able to have consultants that were hired by the museum work with the students on everything from writing and presentation to learning about how to conduct the tests and learning in general just about the watershed and its marine life.
Wonderful. I'd like to take a quick moment to note that I see some great comments popping into the chat here of other classrooms and teachers doing work like this. We have an example here in Texas and also one in the Bronx. So please feel free to share with us your experiences with programs like this and things that you found most effective and most interesting. And we'd love to kind of compare notes as we move through today. What were some of the big surprises that you found as you were doing this work?
Well, one of the big surprises that I found while I was doing this was the turbidity levels. Going into this, before we went onto the waters, I suspected that it would be 10 centimeters. I was just like, wow, because it takes a lot of sediment for it to only get down 10 centimeters before you can't see it anymore.
Wow. So it sounds like the problem was much worse than you had originally guessed it would be.
Yes.
Wow. It sounds like you had to learn a lot of very specific information here to understand unfolding different parts of this process. I won't lie and say that a lot of it is new to me, and it's really exciting to hear about how you unfolded each area of collecting this information. What are some of the things that you learned that you find most interesting?
Let me see. ppms. It's supposed to represent parts per million, and that's for the thing. What was it? Thing. Sorry. For parts per million, it's the number that we found. If it was like 1 per million, that's good. If it's more than that, that's kind of bad. And the thing about the thing that I found surprising was that in different spots in the Anacostia River, they had different ppms for different things, like nitrates and phosphorus. So it was like in the top, upriver and in the upper part of the
along the way.
hmm
Interesting. So now that you're developing this kind of unique skill set, do you have plans on continuing to work with this in the future, either connected to this program, or what work are you doing now connected to it?
Well, currently I'm not doing any work now connected to it, but I do plan to use this information, and I plan on teaming up with the Anacostia Community Museum and the program that we're in Power, and maybe digging deeper into it. At first I see it as we were finding out about it, but now I feel like we should take the next step and find a solution for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, with partnering with the Anacostia Community Museum, at first I would just tell people not to litter, but it's more than that. You have to let the whole community know how they're affecting their environment, because it affects them too.
Yeah, it sounds like it goes much deeper than just the kind of initial findings of don't litter. And
Yeah.
definitely the results that you found are much more than, oh, there's trash floating in the water. It seems like major health concerns for things living in the river as well as things living near the river, such as us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's over 10,000 people who live on the river and depend on the fish that's in there. So if we pollute the water, then the fish will have tumors and mutate, and then the people on the river who depend on it, they will get sick. That's not a fun idea.
No, those are some incredible findings. I'm also curious, and we may actually turn the floor back to Tony here for a moment. about what other communities you're connecting with and working with, and plans for the future with the museum that are similar to this program, or maybe take it in a different direction.
Well, we plan, we're now working on a collaboration with the Smithsonian's Environmental Research Center, which is located in Edgewood, Maryland, which is south of Annapolis. And this, we've just begun to develop this collaboration, but we're going to center it around a research question that we can address over the next 6-7 years. And we will be in collaboration also with the Baltimore Parks and People organization to do similar type testing in watersheds in 2 different urban areas. And since Baltimore is only about 35-40 miles north of Washington, D.C., we think that we can generate some data that will give us some valid information by which we can base some solution proposals to people in powerful positions to change how we use the land, and so that it will change the way the water improves over time. When you look at the 2 cities of Baltimore and Washington, D.C., Washington, the Anacostia River is only 176 square miles. And when you look at the water at the head of this watershed, and it's nice and clear and just almost delicious looking when it bubbles up out of the ground. And then when you get downstream and you can see that the water is has so much undissolved sediment in it that you can't see 10 centimeters below the surface of the earth. And when you surface of the water. And when you consider the PCBs, the mercury, the metals, and other toxins that you find in the water, and they become evident when we actually take tissue samples from the fish that we catch. Now, the students aren't involved in that at this point, but at some point they will be. And we're taking, we found out a couple of years ago, 17,000 plus people fish the Anacostia for subsistence every year. And so 17,000 plus are consuming that fish on a weekly or daily basis. So the University of Maryland College Park Institute of Public Health and the museum, the Anacostia Community Museum, entered into a collaboration where we were trying to re-educate the fishers on this river. And it is a very slow process because many of these people are immigrants. And they're saying, this river is a whole lot cleaner than the river I've been fishing all of my life. And my family depends on the food, and they're catching the carp and the catfish, and that's where you're getting all of the contaminants. I mean, those are the most contaminated fish in the Anacostia. So we've been trying to say, well, if you have to fish higher in the water column. These students will get there eventually, okay, during this process. But we're looking at adding a biological water quality monitoring protocol this year. And then they will go forth using macroinvertebrates with the chemical testing. Eventually we will get to stream bank restoration, wetland restoration, and other types of projects. We're also going to focus our attention on the tributary that runs through their community, which is called Watts Branch. And we have a collaboration with the mayor of Seat Pleasant, which the headwaters of Watts Branch are located. And we're going to see if we can't move forward to turn Watts Branch into a model laboratory. And it's walkable. Okay, in a couple of hours you can walk from head to mouth. And so we'll be able to develop this stream and this tributary to do anything that we want. We can test and we can do anything that we want. Okay, as long as we come up with the scientific questions to generate and to the research, we'll move forward with this project, and it'll develop along those lines.
That's wonderful. It sounds like a lot of solutions are coming from just identifying the problem more specifically, which seems like a very important piece that maybe people would miss, that you can recognize, oh, that water's polluted. We don't really know what to do with that.
Right.
But it seems like you've put a lot of work and time into really specifying the pieces, and now the solutions are unfolding from there.
Right.
I have to say, I'm shocked to hear that so many people directly are fishing and eating from there. I think a lot of people might have the mental disconnect of, oh, you buy your fish at the grocery store. It comes from somewhere else. If the local river's polluted, oh, that's not affecting anybody. Everyone's going to be fine. But the fact that you said you found 12,000 people.
17,000 plus.
17,000 plus that were directly. So you have different things to combat here. People that may say, oh, it doesn't matter what's happening to that. I get my food from elsewhere. And then another group of people that say, oh, it's way better than where I was getting my food before.
And you can't argue with that. I mean, when it comes down to eating or not eating for your family, yeah, you know, it's hard to argue. It's hard to tell somebody you can't eat that fish. And there's signs all around, but people aren't paying any attention to the signs. They just know that they have to bring food home.
Mm. And how do you articulate these findings to different types of the community? Because it sounds like you have to say things in a different way to different people for them to understand what you've discovered. Have you done any brainstorming around that, or have there been any attempts so far in communicating key pieces that you've noticed you've had to shift a little here and there?
Well, not for me.
No.
There hasn't.
Well, it sounds like just identifying the different parts of the problem have taken quite a bit of time and expertise. So it's like one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
I want to add something here. As the students went through this program, we saw a dramatic change in attitude. The first day I met them, and they were looking at me like I was crazy. You know, we're going to do what? No, we don't want to be. Trip process. They began to understand how land use impacts water quality, and water quality impacts the health of the community that it flows through. We begin to hear changes in attitude and conversation. And it was after we left the wastewater treatment plant, it was called Blue Plains here in Washington, D.C., that Kenny and I just started, I mean, we would just had our chest poked out. I mean, it was just, it was such an illuminating moment, one of those aha moments. When you see the light bulb come on in a child's head, you know, we heard conversations of, well, you know, maybe when I go to college, maybe I ought to think about civil and chemical engineering. And somebody else said, well, you know, I'm really not interested in a four-year college, but maybe I ought to go to a community college and get one of these technical certifications so that I can have a skill that I can take anywhere in the world and find work. To go from I don't want to be bothered to thinking about college, I mean, and majors and certifications for technical operations. Yeah, that was a moment. That was a moment.
Actually, I'd love to hear from Cristal and Z on that. How did your feelings around this project shift from the start to where you are now?
Well, in the beginning, I really didn't care about the Anacostia River. I didn't think it affected me at all because, you know, I thought that we drank from the Potomac River, so it doesn't affect me. But the thing is that it affects everybody downriver. So when we pollute the water and they treat it, the more polluted it is, the more chlorine they put in it. So I'm thinking if we pollute it even more than it is now, it's probably going to taste like pool water. But and I honestly learned that there's dead zones in like Mexico. I mean, in the Gulf of Mexico because of the other rivers around the other rivers that are polluted. And I don't want that to happen to the Chesapeake Bay because the Chesapeake Bay is getting there because of the thing from this project is that it doesn't just affect us, it affects everybody. And this isn't a lesson that only I can learn, it's something that everybody in the world can learn.
Well, for me, had a major impact on me. Well, in the beginning, uh, I really didn't care about the Anacostia Watershed. I mean, the Anacostia River, sorry. I didn't care anything about tributaries or anything of that sort. But as the weeks progressed, I began to become interested in it because I started to realize that these problems are hitting close to home since we live like right on the Anacostia River. So I became very interested in it, especially with the field trips we had. Like they were kinetic, so we got to move around and actually experience. Like in this photo, we got to actually experience some of the mutations within the fish, or some of the mutations that the fish had to suffer, or the marine life. So it made me more aware and made me more cautious of the things that I'm putting into the environment.
So looking at this photo here, were you actually examining some of the fish that you found for tumors, or what was going on in this image?
Well, in this image, we had just, well, in the previous image, we were, yeah, like in the previous image, this is us. We were pulling in fish. We had a net. And one thing with this image, it shocked me because after we put it in, we realized that while the net was heavy, most of the things on the net, it was either trash or they were dead fish. So we ended up with like 5 or 6 fish out of total. So then in the picture after this, uh, those are the live fish that we had, and that's just us looking at them and examining them, and then we're actually being
You know, like some of the fish that we saw were way too small. Like when they first, I'm pretty sure they weren't like after they hatched, they were this size. It seemed like they've been that size for a while, so we had to throw those ones back. They couldn't even survive in the water. I mean, out of the water for like a few seconds.
Wow.
And then like the other fish, they were able to do it, and some is the mutation varied. Like some were way smaller than they were supposed to. Some were huge. Like it was those type of mutations that happened that I saw too.
And also, I want to say this photo represents some important moments for our program, and one of the reasons we wanted to partner with the Anacostia Community Museum, because I would say, we ended up doing 2 trips of kids, so we ended up with about 35, 40 kids who participated in this experience. Where Tony said, when we started initially in the classroom, telling them what we were going to do and how, in the process we're doing it, kids were afraid to get on the water. There were kids who were like, I'm not touching no fish, they nasty, So it was this, y'all crazy if y'all think y'all going to get us out on a boat in the middle of the river, and touching these nasty things. Well, some of the kids who were the most afraid are in these pictures holding fish in their hand, listening to the guys, learning about this stuff. And after a while, didn't even notice that they were on the river. It was just fun. It was learning. They were consumed with the process of really being a citizen scientist. So where you see on the boat them explaining certain things to the kids, we did about 4 or 5 different experiments. They brought the fish up in nets. I mean, it was just amazing for me to see somebody who's been working with these kids for 2 or 3 years now, to see some of the kids, the way they were able to stretch themselves as part of this project and learn something really about themselves and what they could do if given both the opportunity and the willingness to try something new. So this was important for our project. And going forward, most of the kids you see in this photo are going to graduate next year, but we plan on working with the Anacostia Museum with another cohort of kids from middle school, and those kids will get to participate in this project with the museum for the next 5-6 years, and then we really want to see that impact on students who come into this project early.
It's wonderful. And actually, that ties nicely into a question that popped up in chat here from Michelle, wondering if the program has opened up the eyes of some of the students to careers in the environmental science field. And I'll start with the two students that we have right here. Have you become more interested in some of the career branches along this path?
Actually, I have. I've always been interested in science, but never environmental science. I was more of I like space and chemicals. But when I saw like the bad, how we the humans directly affected the environment, like I want to learn more. So I would like a career that I can learn from and that can help other people learn from too. So like I just might go into a career in that.
Well, this program has opened my eyes up to a career in the environmental science field. Well, that'll be my second career if my first one doesn't go through. But yeah, it has opened my eyes up to it. It's interesting, it's fun, and it's very educational.
That's great. I see another question that came into the chat a little earlier. Mike was wondering if you include a study of invasive species in your program. Did you look at those as well while you were testing the water?
We like where did we go?
You were, I know we did something on the boat because we talked about.
No, I'm talking about the aquarium.
Yeah, that's right.
We went to an aquarium
right.
and it had evasive species and
the snakeheads.
yeah, the snakeheads and all those. And we saw how like invasive species, plants and fish affected the other marine life. So when an invasive species comes, then they might eat up all the food for the other fish, and those fish die. It's a lot of things that any small change in the environment can have a dramatic change on the marine life. So just put in one invasive species, be it a plant or a fish or animal, it's going to affect the whole entire ecosystem in the Anacostia River.
So it sounds like the issues that you found were really twofold. There was the whole pollution aspect, and then there was competition from new species that had been introduced, I'm guessing also most likely by humans in most of those contexts.
Yeah.
I mean, these fish and plants had to fight off pollution and competition. So that in the Anacostia River. Like when we was on a boat, I learned that there used to be clams at the bottom of the Anacostia River, and they pollute. I mean, not pollute. They cleanse and detoxify the river, but it's got so toxic that they can't even be there anymore.
Wow.
I'm like, how does a river get so toxic that the natural cleansers cannot even survive in those conditions?
That's chilling. Yeah, and that is an excellent question. Wow. Now, earlier you mentioned that you were doing some testing near water treatment plants as well that released water. What were your...
Well, the test that we did about water treatment plants, we found out that they were still the same as in the regular Anacostia River. Well, no, scratch that. They weren't the same, but they only helped a little bit. So, uh, yeah, they helped a little bit, but we think we should be able to increase that. Increase the help that it can. Sorry. I believe that the water treatment plants should be able to help the river more than it does now. Yeah.
And the water treatment plant, that's all it does. It treats the water. So once you put it back into the river, what do you have? You have that excess sediment right there mixing right back in it. So it's, even though the water did get better, because it's mixed back into the original river, then it's still going to get polluted. And then that becomes the problem for the next town downstream.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's not as lasting a solution as some people might have hoped, to just treat the water, release it back in, and leave the water maybe a little cleaner. But
No.
it's still a little heavily polluted.
Yeah.
Yes,
Interesting.
definitely.
Now, did all of you work on every aspect of the project, or did you take a specific piece that became your specialty and your focus during that time?
Well, throughout the program, we all worked on the different aspects of. We all worked on the different aspects, but then in the end, when we had to do a presentation on it, we all chose a specific piece from the entire thing.
Interesting. So you got to focus on your favorite piece, or the piece that you found most interesting and then you presented to your classmates, or was it, what was the presentation?
We presented it to the Anacostia Community Museum on our findings, and some of the things that was in our presentation wasn't just the pollutants. It was how those pollutants affected other rivers in the United States. So, like, one of the rivers that phosphorus and nitrates, that was our topic. Well, my team's topic. One of the rivers that was affected by phosphorus and nitrates was the Bronx River, and other teams used the Mississippi River and rivers that flowed into the Gulf of Mexico. And dead zones was probably like the major thing, the major focus within a lot of people's projects and presentations.
And how did you find out about the other rivers? What broadened it to include those?
Well, we used the How's My Water EPA app, and we just went on there and we typed in different areas and rivers came up. So we basically, in a way, we sort of chose at random which rivers we wanted to use, and then from there we just took those rivers and compared them to the Anacostia.
Interesting. And is that information that's been shared by citizen scientists or by local environmental groups collecting the information in those regions?
I believe it's been by citizen scientists. Oh, and EPA.
Oh, great, great. So this is really joining together the data that everybody's finding. That's excellent. So did you find that it helped to recognize some larger trends across the different rivers, or did you find that different regions are facing very different problems?
It's mostly different regions have different problems, because some regions would just have a trash problem. One would have phosphorus nitrates. One would have excess sediment. But in general, all of those are terrible things that humans do to the water. Like, because we, like, one example. When we cut down on the wildlife, it doesn't hold that's when the soil, there's nothing to hold it back. So now we have excess soil, sediment in our river. It
seems to go back to the domino effect that we were talking about
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Everything's a domino.
Wow. Oh, excellent. And so we're looking right now at an image of the final day of the program.
Yeah, this is an image of the final day, the day that the students, small groups, presented their research projects. And this photo includes the instructors that were part of the whole project. You see Mr. Kenny Carroll there in the front. Okay, he was the only one young enough to squat down. Yeah. And Dr. Bimley is on the left, and next to him is we now call her Dr. Lauren Saxton. She just received her PhD in mass communications, and we're real proud of her. I'm on the back row on the left. Intisar, where's Intisar? Intisar is on the front row on the left. On the right, all the way over next, right there. That's Intisar. And Kenny, and who else is, anybody else in there? I think that's it, and the rest of them are students. The one thing I want to say to teachers, as a former classroom teacher, I know that you all are catching the blues in the classroom. And it has a lot to do with a lack of resources and a lack of leadership and short-sightedness on the goals and objectives that our children need and the skills that they need to be contributing civilians in our communities. But if you can find a way to get some sort of a collaboration going, either through the PTA with local businesses, churches, other organizations, to get some money to do something like this. I have always found that no matter what the skill level of the student, if you can put their hands and their feet in it, their minds and their hearts will shortly follow, especially if they find an interest. We are having a problem and placing our children in programs like this. Not to say this is a good program or not, but there are other programs out here, and you can find them in almost any community. You just need to find a way to plug your students into it. And if you can't do it through the school, then try to do it through whatever organization that you're involved in outside of the school. Our public educational systems are in need of some help in this regard. And I encourage teachers, since you were called to be an educator, take this seriously and try to find a way to introduce your children to something that will turn the light bulb on in their head. And in the environment, you can use the community that you're in and many different ways that you can approach this by fauna, water, many different ways you can address this issue. Just find a way, whatever's in your community that they have access to. And if it's no more than the backyard of the school or the house of worship or the organization, the park, use it. And you can build a curriculum around this. And to tell you the truth, if you look hard enough, you won't have to build a curriculum. You can find, there are plenty of curriculums out here. NOAA has curriculums. Chesapeake Bay Foundation has curriculums. Urban Waterways has curriculums. There's many of your institutions of higher education, your colleges and universities, they have programs that you can matriculate your students through in summer camps and so forth.
Wonderful.
So I encourage teachers, it's going to take some work, but it's well worth the return on the investment. Well worth it.
Well, thank you so much, Tony and Kenny, for coming in and talking with us about this program. And also, I'd like to note that some resources popped up there in the chat as we were going along.
Oh.
So please feel free to go back and scroll through the chat and see some of the other links that were provided while we were talking today. I'd especially like to say thank you to Cristal and Z for not just joining us to speak today, but for being citizen scientists and doing the work that you've done thus far, and I look forward to learning more about the work in the corner of the screen. So as we're doing our final wrap up here, please make sure to click on that yellow evaluation button to launch that survey in your browser window. We'd love your feedback on today's session, as we're always looking to prepare future sessions as well. And keep in mind that we do have this session recorded, so if you'd like to go back and review any of the content today, that archive will be made available, as well as the archives for many other sessions that we've done up till now, and there will be many more to come. So please tune back in and check with us to hear more. Thank you so much, everyone.